Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is our last session of the conference. I will be introducing very shortly a distinguished panel of speakers and discussants, starting with our host extraordinaire, the charming Dr. Aviad Stollman, who is going to speak to us about the project of the Hebrew manuscripts at the National Library of Israel. So without further ado, I invite Dr. Stollman to speak to us. Please.
Good afternoon. In 1950, in fact, in March, you can see the date on this letter, was written in Tiberias by our Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, wrote a letter. He was probably vacationing in Tveria, and I don't know how this idea hit him. He decided to initiate the Institute of Microfilmed Hebrew Manuscript. He wrote to his finance minister, Kaplan. He allocated 50,000 lirot, which were about 50,000 pounds of those days. Chagai before said to me that that was a price of about one tank. But with this country struggling, a lot of enemies around us, and many people making aliyah from many countries, David Ben-Gurion understood that it's extremely important to get the Hebrew manuscripts from all around the world here to Jerusalem. And he writes in this letter to Kaplan that obviously we're not going to be able to get the actual manuscripts, but what we can do is go out and use the most advanced technology, which was microfilm in those days, and picture. And what has been the history? So it all started in 1952. It took it some time, I'm sure some committees. And today, what we have is a few things. And don't underestimate each one of these, and especially the first one, because people usually say, well, you have a catalog, obviously, but in my humble opinion, the catalog is almost as important, or perhaps even more important than the images themselves. Because what we have here is like a union catalog of Hebrew manuscripts. So even if you have access, let's say you're living in New York, and you go into our website and you look for a certain manuscript, so it's going to be in the seminary, it's going to be in Columbia or NYU or wherever, but your finding aid is this catalog, and that's extremely important. Even if this is all that has been achieved, it's amazing. But as you know, there's much more has been achieved. About 75,000 reels of microfilms are here in this building. And Chagai told me that when he started using it, I'm not going to say how many years ago, this was the room where the institute was active. And overall, we have microfilm from 1,200 institutions. I don't know of any other international project of this magnitude. 1,200 institutions. Just try to write a letter to 1,200 institutions asking them for. We've tried to do it last year. Overall, a coverage of 95% of all known. Of course, some of you might have some manuscripts at their homes and we don't know about them. And so if you do, please let us know. And Andreas keeps sending us material finding stuff in Germany, in Austria, and other participants of Books Within Books keep finding manuscripts, and people are purchasing, acquiring. It's always very important to keep us updated, because if we don't know about it, then it's going to be in the catalog, and the scholars are not going to be about it. But I would like to relate to this question of accessibility, and how do we redefine accessibility? And there are 4 dimensions that I see. So there are these advanced finding aids, which are obviously very important. But if we look at these triangles, physical accessibility, so where is it located? So it's located physically here. The images are located in Jerusalem, and you have to make the trip to Jerusalem. Maybe some of you who have come from abroad have used this opportunity to go downstairs and look at the manuscript. But so obviously accessibility is limited to some extent. It's located in one place, which is great. But still, it would be wonderful if it was accessible all over the world. Of course, we don't mind having more visitors in the building, but we like to think of our patrons, the users, first. And then the quality of images. What is the quality of images? That's part of this question, this equation of accessibility. And finally, the easy viewing of images. These are 4 elements that I see are essential for accessibility. And what I wanted to say about these, first begin with the 3 dimensions of accessibility. The physical accessibility. So obviously, if we move on to the internet, once we put the material online, that's the best accessibility you can possibly imagine, because as was mentioned before, you can have it at the leisure of your home or wherever you might want to look at these manuscripts that are available for you. That's probably the best, and the internet technology provides that capability. And then the quality of images. So we all know Professor Choueka might speak about the quality of images. We know much more because of the Friedberg Genizah project, which again is an unbelievable accomplishment. We know much more about what is the definition of high quality. You know, you all heard numbers of 300 dpi's and 600 dpi's and 40 pixels for each letter and certain numbers. We know much more now than we knew before, and when we ask our photographers within the building and our partners like Ardon, who do amazing work around the world, we know what the criteria is. And obviously, easy viewing, because it's not enough. I have to say something negative. I mean, everything has been so good, but we know that currently what we offer here at the Institute is not satisfying. Digital is not a way of presenting images, and we're working on a better solution. I mean, it wasn't really intended to be a solution for accessibility, but it's not enough to have the greatest. If you have the greatest TIFF images, it's not enough if you don't have a good viewing system. And of course, a digital viewer could be much more complicated and beneficial. And then there's the 4th dimension, which I feel is very important in order to achieve this goal of accessibility, and that's documenting and finding. This is the current record that you probably all know, the current record display that we use at the National Library. It is very technical. Most of the people here know how to use it, but it's very difficult for most of the potential users, because it's in Hebrew, because librarians wrote it. I mean, this is very good for me. It's good enough for me, but I know many users are not going to be able to use it, and I'm going to show how it is possible to make it much better. Obviously, when you're trying to deal with 95% or 100%, if your goal is 100% of all manuscripts, this is what you can provide. But what I'm going to talk about now is more of a boutique option where we are more selective, it's more curated, but we can provide more material around it, which is very expensive. It's much more expensive than the digitization process itself. So the 4th dimension, there are several elements that I find, and you our panelists and you here might raise other issues, but I can think of several things of how to make this active. So firstly, bilingual method, at least bilingual. Pardon me, all the non-English speaking countries, but if you have it in English, it's probably good enough, at least for the beginning. It might be, if you're doing Italian history, you're doing French history, it might be a good idea to put that in that relevant language. But let's begin with English. The other is analytic and cataloging, which again is a very expensive process in the way that you take a manuscript and you sometimes have to sit a week or 2 weeks trying to figure out what happens in each page. And when I mean analytical, it's not just writing the way we do sometimes here in the Machon, that we write from page 5 to page 10, this is so-and-so. I'm talking about some sophisticated method that will enable you, and I'll show you an example, will enable you to find something very quickly and to jump to that right page. And of course, publishing the metadata, making it available on the web, because most of our users, or again, not the users, the professional users, but I don't know, my daughter or my son are trying to look for something for a project they're doing in school, so they'll probably use Google, right? And they'll Google a certain word. There's no way, even if we have an image of a manuscript and it's been cataloged, they're not going to find it because the metadata is not on the web. And even if it was the web, there's not enough information in that metadata. It's so professional for the general public to access the information. And then, of course, there's the element of crowdsourcing, which I feel is very important. Crowdsourcing can be, in your project, the FGP project, it's been used very successfully, I think, and in other international projects where scholars can really add to the or at least to a layer of the cataloging record. And it's extremely beneficial. If I wrote my dissertation on something, so instead of writing the National Library, listen, I have used this image, please put it on, I'm just putting it as a what we call in Hebrew, tokbek, and accompanying full text. This is something essential, not only for the finding aids, because if you want people, if I have a good description of a certain manuscript and I explain why it's important and I write a short essay about it, it could be even 200 words, but proper English, not technical terms, explaining what it is, there is a chance that somebody will find it in a Google search. And one example is this website. It's probably the first time you see this because this is the new version that we're going to be publishing in a few weeks, I guess, days. I mean, it's really ready, but we're waiting for a few other things to tying the loose ends. This is the Talmudic manuscript website, which used to be JNUL, now it's NLI. And that was great that I was able to meet here with some of the librarians that hold the treasures that are found in this wonderful website. And what's important here, and this is an example of what I call analytical breakdown of a manuscript, because what happens is somebody picks Masechet Shabbat, Tractate Shabbat, he or she picks the folio and the page, and it finds the different, it gives the user the different manuscripts that are available specifically for that. Now, there are many people who study the Talmud every day. We know of the Daf Yomi. There are probably hundreds of thousands of people who might be using it if it was possible. Now, all of these things are available, of course, in the microfilm. They might be available even in digital form. But what this website does, and Professor Choueka will speak, I guess, later about another project which is going to make this look obsolete, is a way of where somebody can look for what the user can look for what he or she is looking and find all the possibilities. Another example that was done in the library is for instance the Worms Machzo. I believe this is the Worms Machzo, where you have again the manuscript was broken up to units. So I can take, for instance, I was talking to Ilana before, I can take the 50 most important Haggadot, Passover Haggadot, and put them all on one website and break them down into the same units. So everybody wants to see what the Arba'a Banim look like in all the Haggadot. So you can look, you scroll down with this drop-down box, Arba'a Banim, and you get 50 pictures, 50 images right away. This is something that will make the manuscript accessible. People tell me, well, manuscripts are boring. They're just, we're not. I'm sorry. Where's David? We keep repeating. You said the text is not king anymore. You might be right, but the truth is, if we make it accessible, we'll find out that there are many potential users, and not just us, scholars writing dissertations that will be using this material. So what I suggest is that he wasn't Jewish, right? What I'm suggesting is definitely not. Quite the opposite. what I'm suggesting is that we have to focus and prioritize. And focusing means being a bit more selective in this project. Being, might say even drastically more selective in order to allow greater success. So I'm not saying we should give up the Institute for Microfilmed. I mean, I do think we have to move to the next stage of digitization, but we're still, will be, and we are, we'll try to get an image of every single Hebrew manuscript in the world, no matter how important it is, and we're going to have it here, digitally preserved, etc. But what I'm talking about, this project is a project that is trying to make the Hebrew manuscripts more accessible for the general public and how to succeed. And in order to do that, we have to be more selective. In the first stage, we're suggesting to pick the 1,000 most important manuscripts in a variety of fields. And in the second stage, to add 5,000 more, which will give you about, overall, will give you about 10% of the extant manuscripts. Now, the guidelines for selection are it's of course something, it's not that simple. I mean, you might be able to tell me, each one of you will tell me, in my library, you know, if it's a Minchen, so everybody knows the Codex 95 is an extremely important manuscript, and that must be included. And each one of you knows what are his or her treasures. But what we've done last year, we've begun in this process, and we haven't completed it. We asked dozens of scholars to tell us, you're a scholar of Judeo-Arabic, you're a scholar of German culture, of Jewish German culture. Please let us know, what are the 20 most important manuscripts? And I know scholars always have a problem with this, because how can you say that this is more important than that? Well, as a scholar of manuscript, of Talmudic manuscript, there are manuscripts that are simply more important than others. And of course, I mean, you see here, I gave you some ideas, and our panelists might add other criteria. But there is a way, I believe, to use the extensive research. Because if you think about it, this project began in 1950. 60 years of scholarship. I hope that by now we know what is more important, more is more relevant. You did your work on Talmud. You can tell me which manuscripts are more important in the tractate that you were working on. I mean, and we have to be more selective in certain areas. And so what has been done so far, you probably want to know. So we have preliminary lists, and I've been in touch with some libraries, not all represented here. And we sent them some of the lists that we made, and we told them it's not that these lists are not final, but we were able to agree. Let's say there are 10 very important manuscripts. Just to give you an example. In our library, we hold 8,000 manuscripts, but there are probably less than 100 manuscripts that I would consider extremely important. Less than 100, much less. There are other libraries that have 10% of what we have, let's say the Vatican or Oxford, but their manuscripts are extremely important. I mean, it's not really about our collection, it's what is considered, what is important in the classical works, etc. So there might be a library where we'll be interested in getting 30% of what they have, and some other libraries we'll only be interested in 2 or 3 manuscripts. But on those manuscripts, we will give everything. These manuscripts will get all of our attention. We will write the metadata in both languages. We will make the extensive research of analyzing the manuscript and putting it all into the computers. We have sent our Ardon around the world. Contracts have been signed with some libraries. Hundreds of manuscripts have been digitized. And like Orient said, one of the services that we're providing, so to say, is digital preservation, because we're going to be investing huge amount of resources, and we feel an obligation to help, especially the smaller libraries, to cope with this problem of digital preservation. So if you give us the images, the TIFF images will be stored here, will be ingested in the system, in the digital preservation system, whatever Alon will decide will be the right, will write the right system for us, and they will be preserved hopefully for generations. And we were able to get some financial resources, and we're still working on getting more resources because, of course, the more money we have, the quality of the metadata and our success will be greater, and of course we will be able to add more material. So what's for the future? We would like to finalize the list with your help and with the help of scholars who are independent, meaning there are scholars of different Judeo languages or topics or historical eras, and they come up with the list, the ultimate list. For instance, I'll give you just one example, a scholar like Yossi Avivi, who is a great scholar of not only of manuscript, but of specifically Lurianic manuscript. And for him, it's very easy because of the work, the research, extensive research he's done, to tell me, just to give you statistics, if about 20% of the manuscript overall, if you're thinking about 75,000 manuscripts, about 20% of them are related to Kabbalah, many of them related to Lurianic Kabbalah, but many of them are just another copy of the same work. And Yossi can tell me which ones are really the fundamental ones. You know, obviously, if there's a work that is documented, there's a great manuscript from the 17th century, and then we have it 300 times from 1819. I'm not saying we shouldn't include some just for the sake of including and understanding the history of the textual transmission. But if there is a good text, I'm going to use it, and I don't have to, and I prefer to invest the rest of the money in getting something else from a different culture, which otherwise is not so documented. We will, of course, sign more contracts, digitize more manuscripts. This event has been very successful in the sense that it was enabled us to meet the people, to make the connections, and ask people to allow us to do this. And I'm sure this is really just the beginning. It's not the end of the convention, because I hope at least until the next one in 2 years, we have a lot of work to carry on from here. One of the great barriers is developing a user-friendly digital platform. It's not easy. I personally haven't seen a system where I thought I saw the system and I said, that's great. That serves all the purposes. I think something like that should be developed. It's not easy. Even the FGP, which is a good system in some ways, is not very user-friendly in other ways. And it might be good for scholars, but what we're looking here is something that will be good for everyone. The system that you've developed is great for some purposes, but again, there are more layers that have to be added, especially, and it's a challenge. I mean, we're not the only one working with manuscript. There are other universities, other initiatives, and we will be, again, very helpful, thankful if you provide us with your input of what do you feel is essential in having such a system? And obviously the system is going to be good for 5 years, for 10 years, and it will have to be replaced eventually because things develop. That's it.
Thank you very much to Dr. Stollman for his inspiring and visionary presentation. Now I have the pleasure and honor to invite Professor Choueka, Yaacov Choueka, formerly Professor Emeritus of Computer Sciences at Bar Ilan University and now Director of a Friedberg Genizah project, to speak to us on some very important projects, the Genizah project, of course, as well as a Talmud project. And we invite you, Professor Choueka, to come to the platform.
Thank you very much. Preliminary remark. As you heard, I am not a librarian, I am not an archivist, I am not a curator, and I am certainly not a donor. I am a computer scientist, probably the only one in this room. And you will feel it in my talk, and you probably felt it in the website of the Genizah project. Probably the only website designed by a computer scientist to be used by humanities scholars. By the way, to answer Aviad, about the user friendliness of the site, may I quote Einstein, was mentioned several times in this conference. He said once, "You should make things as simple as possible, but no more." There are some things, if they are valuable, they are worth something, they cannot be simple. What can we do? Thank you. So, I will begin my response to Aviad by stating a few things about the Friedberg Genizah project. You saw the poster, I hope, downstairs, and we tried to give everyone a handout that explains what is the project and what was achieved by the project. And I recapitulate it very, very briefly. The project, the computerization project, was started in 2006. Currently, we have in the website 46 collections of Genizah. In the handout I gave you, there is a full list of all Genizah collections in the world, and this is the first time in 120 years that there is such a list. Nobody, till we came, nobody knew how many and where are all the Genizah collections. And this is because we are very pedantic. As a computer scientist, I have to be comprehensive, I have to be systematic. And that's how we came with this list, which we think is very comprehensive. And besides the 46 collections that we already digitized, you have also the list of what has not yet been digitized and what will be finished this summer, etc. In the website, we have now 412,000 digital images of Genizah fragments. Probably this is the largest virtual library of any kind anywhere that contains digital images of historical manuscripts. We checked it, and we think there is no other website so large, and it was achieved in about 5 years. Of course, with the cooperation of all the libraries, and this is an excellent opportunity to thank all of you here, with whom I have a lot of correspondence, and we are so grateful to them for their goodwill and for their cooperation spirit. In fact, except maybe for 3 or 4 collections, for 3 or 4 libraries, everyone that we contacted was very cooperative and gave us the license to digitize for him, or they digitized their collection and they gave us a license to display it on our website. So thank you for that. But the website is not only digital images. We have about 500,000 data items on these Genizah fragments, including, for example, 220,000 citations, bibliographical references. We are more or less sure that every shelf mark that was ever mentioned in any publication, in any language, since 1895 till 2008 is mentioned in the website, which is fantastic, because you may ask the system, show me all shelf marks for which nobody ever published anything. So I can do my master thesis, let's say, on this fragment. Or show me all fragments on which Haggai ben Shammai wrote anything, or didn't write anything, etc., etc. All this can be. Also, we have included, not many, but also we have included in the website about 70,000 scanned entries on Genizah shelf marks from any non-catalog Genizah catalog. Again, till now there was no full list of all Genizah catalogs. We did such a list, and we scanned all the entries of all these catalogs and put them in the website, so that any researcher can have, let's say on his shelf, so to speak, all 70 Genizah catalogs available to him. Also, a lot of other things that were explained in the poster and are explained in the website. We have now about 2,000 registered users. This is nothing compared to the 1 million of Draw Me Something. But when we started doing the computerization, people told us you won't find more than 100 people all the world over that are interested in Genizah. What are you doing? So yes, 100 at the beginning, but now there are more than 2,000 that access it. Not all of them, but hundreds and hundreds of them daily. And when the system is down because of maintenance or something like that, then we get a lot of phone calls. What happens? I can't work. Where is the website? So people are now using it, really. We have a very advanced software on the website, very rich and sophisticated tools for navigation, for research. I can mention here for the first time, because I would like to give a tribute to this audience, of two improvements, two new modules that we are adding to the website, and they will be available in about a month. The first one is a jigsaw module. Suppose you think that you have 5 fragments, one in Paris, one in Oxford, one in Cambridge, one in Paris, one in Strasbourg, one in Vienna, and in fact, the 4 of them are just one page. How can you check for this thesis? Up to now, it's very difficult. So we have now a module that you ask for the images of these pieces, and they will be on your screen, especially if it's a large screen. And then you can work with them as you play with a puzzle, move them, rotate them, etc., until you find out if they really can fit together as one page. And if they can, you just store the image, and the next day it will appear in the site as a join found by Mr. X. So this is totally new, almost a revolutionary method for people, for serious scholars working on Genizah. Another very important new development will be the possibility of calling for 2 or 3 or 4 instances of the website to put as in 4 columns, which can work independently. So you can see on this instance, let's say, an image of a fragment from Paris, and the other one, an image of the fragment from Cambridge, and the third one, the catalog entry of a third fragment, or maybe of the, etc. So you can really play between all these kind of instances very easily. Again, a very good tool for scholars. So this is some highlights of the Genizah computerization project. And I'd like now to draw from our experience in this project one specific point which will be useful for us when discussing Aviad ideas. Let me tell you the story of how we computerized or digitized the CUL Genizah collection. CUL is Cambridge University Library. Now, we contacted them many years ago, and we tried to convince them to let us digitize their collection. Now, it took us about 3 years of contacts and negotiations to get to this result. I had to travel there 3 times at least, as I enjoyed it very much. And we knew, both of us knew, that we are going to expect 360,000 images coming from Cambridge. We knew that because we had first an inventory done for us by the Cambridge staff, and we had a very good idea, in fact, all details of all shelf marks, how many fragments, everything. So we knew we were going to get 306,000 images. Finally, they agreed under certain conditions, among other things, covering all the expenses in the widest sense that you can think of. Okay, and then we had finally a meeting in Cambridge in which I was there to finalize the negotiations, and the meeting was attended by Professor Reif, who was the head of the Genizah Research Unit in Cambridge, and Dr. Ben Oswald, who succeeded him as the head of the Genizah Research, and the chief photographer or digitizer of Cambridge, and a representative from the legal department, etc., about 10 or 12 people. And then we came to talk about the time frame. When can we expect, because they wanted to do the digital themselves. Okay, if you follow our instructions, there is no problem. So we asked them, what is the timetable? And they said they studied it, and they found out that they need 15 years to do this project. I'm not telling you jokes. This is what they told me. So I was silent for 2 minutes, And then with a typical Israeli chutzpah, I said, I think it can be done in 2 years. So there was a big turmoil, and I was almost thrown out of the meeting and of the room. But I said, okay, I'm willing to make a concession. Let's make it 3 years. They say, how? I told them, I'll show you how. And this is what I would like to show you too. This is the computation I did. I told them, we know we need, we expect 360,000 images. We want them in 3 years. So in fact, we need to have 10,000 images per month. How many images can a photographer shoot in an hour? You tell me, X, okay? How many working hours per day? Y, okay? How many working days per month? Z. So a photographer can shoot X times Y times Z, let's say W images per month, okay? So we need, therefore, 10,000 divided by W, that's about 3 or 4 photographers and cameras working in parallel, that's all. If you have 3 photographers working in parallel, you can see the computation, and they can do it in 3 years. And they accepted. They accepted it, and it took them 6 months of preparation, and this was justified because they had to purchase the camera, to prepare a huge space for that, to hire photographers, to train them, to hire students and assistants, to bring the manuscripts and put them in an assembly line way to the photographer. Ardon will know about that because we were the first to do it with him for the JTS. And, but when they finished all the preparation, they were ready, they started shooting in in September 2009. Going to finish by August 2012, which is almost an unbelievable, not for us, but for the Genizah Research Unit, also at Cambridge. We were extremely cooperative, very fruitful cooperation, very positive attitude all the time. And let me tell you, this was not done easily in the sense that, okay, let's shoot and that's it. No, there was a very strict quality control on the side of Cambridge, and very strict checking and verifying on our side. Ask Ilana what kind of reports she gets after every disk she sends us from Rich Library, and how we check and verify every image to find if there are missing images, duplicate images, bad images, etc. So it can be done if you work in parallel, and if you design and plan it as it should be done. Okay, now let me respond a little bit to Aviad's wonderful presentation. Aviad presented us with a really fantastic project, the International Library of Hebrew Manuscripts. I would like to present some ideas, an alternative approach to what Aviad said. It's a little bit of chutzpah, again, to try and give suggestions and advices to people who are working day per day. But I'm trying to bring out some other ideas, and maybe by clashing these ideas together, the best will win. So what is the alternative approach? First of all, we agree, all of us, including Aviad, we said it in the very beginning of his talk, that the goal, the ultimate goal, is to produce or acquire high-quality digital images for every Hebrew manuscript or fragment, anywhere available, making them available to the public through the internet, and in a minimal frame of time. That's important. So this is the goal. Even though maybe we cannot achieve this vision, maybe not immediately, but this is the goal. And this is the goal, we may achieve 95 or 98% of it. We shouldn't forget that the goal is not 6,000 manuscripts, the goal is everything, as is written here. Okay, if so, I would say, let's forget about important manuscripts. Why? First of all, what is important? You try to defend this attitude very nicely. But I again ask, important for whom? For you or for me? You may say, for an expert in Jewish studies. Who is expert in Jewish studies? I know experts in biblical studies, and experts in Talmudic studies, and experts in Jewish thought and philosophy. But who is expert in Jewish studies? Of course, any expert that gives you advice on what is important is biased for his own domain. I know only of one person, which is who is present here, which is not biased, and this is Benjamin Richler. Because his life is manuscript, and he doesn't care, and whatever he says is objective. But except for Benjamin, I think, when you are saying important, you are giving some kind of subjective, any way you would like to look at it, it's a subjective judgment. It's open to criticism. Look, they put this manuscript as important, and they forgot to put that manuscript, which is so much criticism. And, of course, pressures. You know, big Professor X from there, you have to put this manuscript as on. It's objective. It's subjective. So it's open to pressures and open to problems, and it's a very inefficient implementation in a way that I will explain in a few minutes. So maybe we can change important or explain important or define important as medieval. Medieval meaning, say, till the 16th century. So if we understand important by saying medieval, so a manuscript that is dated till the 16th century, then this is an objective criterion. Nobody can pressure me, nobody can criticize me. I'm going to put everything that is medieval. That's it. No important, no important, everything is medieval. Now, how to do it? How to do it? Work in parallel. That's the most important, by the way, this is the most important concept in computer science. Having many chips working in parallel, many computers working in parallel, etc. It's a major idea. It can work also here. Prepare 5 teams of photographers, not one, 5 teams. So if you can send one to Spain and one to England and one to Germany, so they can work in parallel. Because the time frame is very, very critical. I will say about it in a few minutes. So work in parallel. Also focus on the goal, and the goal is everything medieval as a first phase. Concentrate your resources, as I said, many teams, if you have to hire 2 or 3 more employees to get in contact with other places, do it. Design it with efficiency and not only importance in mind. How efficiency? In the following meaning. Suppose, let me just in one minute. Follow the 5-year paradigm. The longer a computerization project takes, the more chance it has to degenerate, to be neglected, or to slowly agonize. This is, my friend, I have 40 years of experience in large computer projects. I did a lot of them. All of them were terminated successfully. None of them agonized. But I saw this with my own eyes. Many projects outside Israel and in Israel that took more computerized projects. I'm talking about something that has to do with computer that takes more than 5-6 years, usually will never terminate and will agonize. Why? Because people change. Aviad is very nice. He's here for 3 years. I don't know where he'll be in 4 years. The photographers are now very, very well trained, but in 3 years they will go work for Google and not for us, etc. Change. Hardware change, software change, operating system change, everything, camera change. So if you finish, then you are finished and you have something which is available. If you train it for more than 5-6 years and you are dealing with computers and hardware and software, you are in trouble. So you have to keep it as much as possible in the time limit of 5-6 years, more or less. That's a very important thing to have in mind. Budget. Budget is a solvable issue, I can tell you. And certainly is not the issue. If you have such a noble cause as this one, computerizing or digitizing all Hebrew manuscripts in the world, and if you show products, and you show a plan, and you show a timetable, you will get the donors, and you will get the foundations. Don't worry about it. People will come to you in order to help you, because this is a fantastic project, something which every Jew and every scholar all over the world will praise it, and so put the budget aside. Budget will come. But focus on having a time frame, a reasonable time frame, on trying to do everything at least till the 16th century and working in parallel. And now, let's assume that we will adopt your idea of 1,000 important manuscripts. Important in your sense, or important in what I am trying to say, let's say medieval. Now, suppose you have a list of these 1,000 manuscripts, and you see how many are in each library. Library A contains 53 of these manuscripts. Library B contains 32 of these manuscripts. Library Z maybe contains 1 manuscript. So you begin working with library A, but then you approach the library A and tell them, don't tell them you have 53 manuscripts which are very important, I would like to computerize, digitize. Tell them, we are the National Library of Israel, we are going to digitize all Hebrew manuscripts in the world. So please let us digitize your entire collection of Hebrew manuscripts. It sounds much better, much closer than saying, I would like to digitize only your most important manuscript. What about the others? Who will digitize it for me? Who will pay for this? You approach the library and say, you were chosen to be the first library that you are going to digitize all the Hebrew manuscripts, or at least all the till. Yes, I'm finished. I'm finished with this, but so this might be an idea of implementing efficiency. If once your photographers are there, it won't cost much more to finish everything there is in the library than to choose and take and pick here and there. I won't say any much more on this idea, but I would like, with the permission of Ilana and of Adiel, to announce a very important announcement, and I'm doing this for the first time here to this public as a tribute to you. And this is about a new project. Yeah, yes. And this is about a new project that we are now designing and planning at the Friedberg Genizah project. The Friedberg Genizah project will be finished more or less this summer. Cambridge Genizah will be digitized. British Library will be finished. Columbia will be digitized. And we'll be left with 2 or 3 collections that we are not able to convince them to cooperate with us. So, and the development of the software will be finished, and there will be only a maintenance. But we are beginning then, as I said, a new, much more ambitious and much more complex, and I hope much more even not useful, but usable project. And I would like to spend 3 minutes to show you what will be this project. And I gave you handouts that you can look at after I present this project. And this is the Friedberg Babylonian Talmud Variant Redux project. What is this project? We would like to have a website in which we are going to put for all manuscripts, for all fragments, whether Cairo Genizah fragments, European Genizah fragment, any other fragment, and all first printed editions anywhere available to put of the Babylonian Talmud, to put them in this website. So we want to put on the website everything, every manuscript, every first printed edition that is related to the Babylonian Talmud. We'd like to put there also high-quality digital images of these manuscripts and fragments, full transcriptions of these manuscripts, and we can then have also what we call a dynamic synoptic display of the variants or the variant readings of the Babylonian Talmud. In what sense? I will explain in a minute. Now, this project is aimed to serve the needs of the Talmudic scholars, of course, but also of Jewish studies scholars, of rabbi and yeshiva students, and in fact, the needs of any layman studying a Talmudic text. As Aviad mentioned, we have probably 100,000, 200,000 people studying Talmud every day, even through the Daf Yomi. We want to serve all of them and the Talmudic scholar, which is a somewhat difficult task to try and care for the needs of the scholar on one hand and of the layman on the other. But this is what we are going to do, and we are going to do it in the following fashion. Here you can see a very typical synopsis of a few manuscripts. I think this was from the Midrash or something, but the general idea is you have here, you can see on the right-hand side the different sources, manuscripts, and then word per word, what's written in every such version, every such manuscript, whether the word is written and how is it written, or is it missing, or there is an added word, etc. This is what's called synopsis. It's well known by anyone who ever studied variants of any text. But this was the situation till now. It was a printed synopsis, books. And even when recently you see synopsis on the computer, it was more or less an image of the synopsis in the books. But we are saying we have a computer. Computer is a radically different thing than a book. It's very dynamic. You can adapt it to the needs of everyone. That's the whole idea of the computer. It's super dynamic. So what we are going to do, we are going to care to every specific user needs. The user will be able to define his profile, who is he, and what he is interested in, and we will adopt this synoptic display to his needs. For example, he can say, which text witnesses will take part in the synopsis. I'm not interested in all the manuscripts. I'm interested only in the Munich and whatever other manuscripts. That's all. Don't show me the other. So he can select which witnesses you would like to see. He can select in what order to display them, because it's more important for him to see the Munich version first and then the others. He can state which is the base version comparing to which all the other variants will be displayed. He can even say what types of variants are of interest to him. A layman studying the Talmud is not interested really in linguistic variants, whether the word is temidin or temidim. What does he care? Whether any other word is written with a verb or without a verb. It doesn't make for him a difference, because he would like to see variants in content. But the linguistic would like, almost finished, the linguist would like really to see only the linguistic variants, and not etc. So we'll care to the needs of every user. And this project started this year, and we hope to finish it by 2018. It's a complex project, it takes a lot of time, but when we will begin it now this year, we'll go again and ask you, people here, to help us getting high quality.
Some good project.
More than 5 years. 6. I always said 5, 6. So we are going to call to you again to help us, Rich Library and all the other people here, to get high quality digital images of all Talmudic manuscripts and fragments. I'm sure you will cooperate, and thank you for this. And my last finish. I wanted to congratulate Aviad and Yaron on their project and wish them good luck whether they accept my suggestion or not.
Thank you very much indeed, Professor Choueka, for this very detailed response, and for his advice, of course, to Aviad. And our next talker, our next discussant, is going to be a person who I had the privilege to know for many years. He is known all over the world. I don't think he needs much introduction, because everybody here in this conference knows Dr. Benjamin Richler. Is an eminent bibliographer. He used to be the director of the Institute of Microfilmed Hebrew Manuscripts for many years. A very knowledgeable manuscript expert. So I won't spend too much time now, because we're running short of time. And I invite, it's my delight to invite Dr. Benjamin Richler to address us.
Thank you, Ilana. Some of the things I was going to say were already more or less said by Yaacov, so I'll skip over them and try to finish on time. One thing, Aviad was speaking about cataloging, the level of cataloging. It wasn't clear to me if he was referring to the catalog of the entire collection or of the cataloging that will accompany the digital images that will be mounted on the web. But I have to say something about the cataloging in the Machon, which has gone through several evolutions, and because of certain constraints of mainly of the number of catalogers, they were never able to catalog as in full all the manuscripts all the microfilms that were coming in. I mean, in the first years of the Machon in the early 50s, there were 1,000 to 2,000 manuscripts a year coming in, and I don't know if there were more than 2 or 3 people, or maybe full-time 2 people cataloging them. And they did all sorts of things to make short catalogs. And the main, I mean, what's most important is to recatalog all of these manuscripts. I've been doing it more or less since I retired, and can do whatever I want, what I like to do, and then find things. Cataloging, I say cataloging is a very dangerous profession. It's it's akin to giving an archaeologist, you give him a shovel, and you tell him go out in the field, and there are 2 things he can do. He can dig up finds that were buried under the ground, or he can come to something that's above ground and cover it up. Because when you do a manuscript, when you catalog a manuscript and you say, oh, it only has, or to give an example, there was one manuscript in our library that had, it said it was Talmud Chidushim by somebody rather unknown. But when I opened it up, I saw that was true only for the first few pages. Afterwards, it was Ritva on Chuli. Not really important, but because it was a late manuscript. But again, yeah, important. I shouldn't say important manuscripts. No, I agree with Yaacov that you can't project importance. What people will be studying in another 100 years, 20 years or more. And I mean, just an example. There are a lot. In Yemen, not very many printed books reached Yemen in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. So it was very common for people to, if you wanted a book, you borrowed it and then made your own copy. I mean, you sat hours and hours, hundreds of hours, and tens of hours. And somebody say there are at least 35 copies of Menorat HaMaor by Yitzchak Abuhav, or even more of the Kabbalistic work to large. Yaakov by Yaakov Gabay. And the philologist will say, nonsense. I mean, it will add absolutely nothing to establishing the correct text of any of these works. And he's right. But there are so many other things. I mean, somebody who was working on the sociology of Yemen, or sociology of reading in Yemen, will say, that was fantastic. Look, these people are willing to pay the equivalent of thousands of dollars in labor. For this book, it must have meant something. It must have been really important to them, and sometimes you have even a copy of a manuscript that is a manuscript copy, which is obviously a copy of a printed book with the most of these manuscripts, by the way, printed book with the title page and all the information, and you'd say, well, it's copied from it's an 18th century copy of a 16th century book, so it's not important. Except we just found another second example in the library of a Yemenite copy of the Shchitot and Bdikot of Yaakov Weil from Venice, 1596. Anybody ever seen in any of the bibliographies or a copy of the 1596 Shchitot and Bdikot? No, because it disappeared. It was a small book, it was very useful, and it disappeared. But we now know that it was copied in Venice. Anybody now writing a bibliography of Venice imprints, or it was probably by Digara, or even of the dissemination of the Shchitot Bdikot, how many times it was printed. Incredibly important. Okay. Another thing, Aviad, if you go on as you plan, in other words, if you go on the minimalist, I think if you're asking experts, I don't know exactly how you're doing it, but I would suggest asking not 1 or 2 experts in the field, but 10 or 20, and then see what they agree on, or what most of them agree on. And another thing is, I'm not sure if anyone has addressed, we're putting these things on the web, but who is our audience? I'll give you an example, a hypothetical example. You have a work which is, it's not Moreh Nevuchim or Mishnah Torah, it's not the ultimate, but it's important work. But there are three manuscripts of it. One of them is the author's autograph, but it's written in a very cursive Spartic script, and it's missing a few pages, and it's smudged here and there. And you probably can't find more than a dozen people in the world who would be able to read it. But it's the autograph. And that's most important for the researcher. And then you have another manuscript written in a nice, almost square script, which anyone who can read a siddur will be able to read the manuscript, even though it's 500 years old. And then you have something in between. Anybody who can read, say anybody who can read Rashi's script will be able to read it. And then one of the manuscripts is even illuminated, so you can kill two birds with one stone. But you can only put up one. You have a limit, and you're not going to put up three of these and only one of Moren Vuchim or something. It would look ridiculous. So which one do you choose? Who's your audience? And I think it would be important also to get feedback. In other words, to know what, let's say. In 1 year, or for every 1,000 people, in 1 year, say 1,000 people go to Bible manuscripts, and only 3 go to philosophy manuscripts. So even though the philosophy manuscripts may be very important, but your audience isn't going to it. So put on more Bible manuscripts. Another thing, we've been talking this whole conference, we've been talking about how wonderful it will be. You've heard this image several times of the scholar or the reader sitting in his armchair or in his office and reading all these manuscripts. And then you can imagine that how the reading room will shrink. There won't be people in the reading room. In other words, they're going to be missing out on something, and that's the interaction between scholars. I don't think there's any way out of it, but that's something that, I mean, if I were to suggest that the next conference that we're going to have in 2 years be a video conference, it'll be a lot cheaper, and you can get 10 times as many people. Anybody can come into it. But it won't be a conference. Look how much work we got done here. How many shidduchim we made here. Yeah. Finally, I'm going to try and keep it within my 10 minutes, but I want to, I just want to do a little science fiction, or maybe it's not science fiction. I like doing these things at the end and see how they are 15 years later. We've gone, we've been microfilming manuscripts and books for 70 years roughly. And now we've practically stopped microfilming, we're all digitizing. And the question was going to be in another, I don't even know if I have to wait 70 years or 50 years, but anyway, here goes. What would happen, I can imagine that there'll be another new technology which will allow you not only to scan the image, but also to read watermarks, analyze the paper, analyze the ink, identify the script, and then we'd be able, my wife, who's a geneticist, says, and analyze the DNA of all people who use the manuscript. So you'd never know who they were. But, I mean, theoretically, then, with all of this, you can almost any manuscript be able to say, well, this must have been written between 1462 and 1471, somewhere between Bologna and Ravenna. And the same scribe copied 3 other manuscripts, whether you know his name or you don't. So it's, I mean, some of you will say, well, I've been watching too much CSI on TV. But, you know, you put it all in a database. I'm not only talking about Hebrew manuscripts, that's peanuts. But if you do this to 2 or 3 million other manuscripts, Latin, Greek, etc., then you can have a fantastic database and you really be able to come out with a clear... whether in 70 years somebody's going to say, okay, let's scan all the manuscripts again. Well, who knows? Who would have thought 50 years ago that within a few decades we'd be saying, let's do the manuscripts all over again. This time by new technology, but that's possible. That's what might be. Another thing, yeah, we mentioned the important manuscripts, non-important manuscripts. Sometimes, I mean, I can think of one thing where the Machon, when they started, they said we're not going to microfilm Torah scrolls because there are thousands and they're not real. There's no real difference between a Torah scroll written 10 years ago, written 300 years ago, even. Which is, yeah, I can see Jordan going. Sorry, I'm going for two. But by doing so, they left out the early, the 12th, 13th century source codes, either in the Vatican, where else, the British Library, Berlin. They were left out, and Jordan goes around now, has to go to these places physically to visit them, as all scholars used to do, and before the Microfilmed began. Okay, 10 minutes are up.
Now, our next discussant is a lady whom I've met many years ago. She is Professor Judith Schlanger from. She's professor of medieval Hebrew manuscripts at the École Pratique des Études supérieures, yes?
The Hautes Études.
The Hautes Études at the Sorbonne University. And she's also the president of the European Association of Jewish Studies. So many of you would know Judith. And she's also a very prolific writer. She's just told me that she's completed her study of the shtarot in the United Kingdom, some of which are in fact held at the British Library. And she will talk, probably, she will mention that shortly, but she'll probably mention other things, exciting things that she has been involved with. Judith.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Ilana. Thank you, Aviad, for inviting me here. I am very excited. It's a wonderful organization. The only thing, why is it so cold in Jerusalem? I didn't expect it at all. So, first of all, I did not prepare a proper talk because I thought that we are supposed to react to what you have said, and this is what I will try to do. But I would like as well to take the opportunity of talking to this wonderful audience and maybe to listen to the comments to this audience as well. That would be the best thing, to present very briefly the project you have heard several times about, books within books, that some call European Genizah, that myself and many other scholars, many of them present in this room, have been involved for the past 3 years, Yaacov, so maybe we have chance still to finish within the 5 years, but I'm not sure. So, first of all, I would like to tell you, Aviad, that the project that we are talking about here brings back memories, not my own personal memories, but memories of the reading I have done, and I'm talking here about Nehemiah Aloni, who has to be mentioned as the one who was one of the founding fathers of this wonderful project that you all know, the Institute for Microfilmed Manuscripts. He, in his diary, which was edited by his wife, I don't know whether all of you know this book, his diaries were edited under a wonderful title, which is Ktav Yad Shel Moshe Rabbeinu, under the date in July 1950. He's telling us about his excitement after he heard on Kol Israel. Here we are talking about technology, yes, great technology. Today it's email, we all meet here. Well, he heard on Kol Israel at one evening that Ben Gurion, this is what we have just heard, has decided to allocate the sum of 50,000 lirot, which was, as we heard, the price of a tank, for this wonderful project, which was the project of going around Europe. And we remember at that time Europe was just coming out of the Second World War, looking for Hebrew manuscripts. Then it was the question of looking for them, not only digitizing them, but looking for them, maybe saving as well them for the libraries, trying to preserve them as well, contributing to the preservation, and bringing back to Jerusalem the microfilms, the images of all these manuscripts. The wonderful project, and as I said, what is the most important here from all this story, what we learn from this story is that at one point in the 50s, where Europe was in a terrible shape, but Israel as well, there was this vision, this amazing interest from the point of view of the government, governing people of this country, to take care of the heritage of the Jewish people. As we know, Hebrew manuscripts, for some communities and for some periods, are the only still existing testimonies of Jewish existence. So it's an extremely important part of Jewish culture as such, of Jewish history, but also of the histories of several European countries where Jewish communities existed. And that's why it has to be considered both from the point of view of Jewish history, but also the history of different countries which preserve until today the manuscripts, or where the scene where the manuscripts were produced. So I would like, in a few words, to say, when I heard Aviad talking about this international digitalized library of all the goal, as Yaacov said, it's all the manuscripts, I was obviously excited, and then suddenly I felt that the dream of all the scholars working on Hebrew manuscripts will come true one day. Just at the click of the mouse, you are going at home to have all what you need. So you will have simply what you have in the Institute for Microfilm manuscripts, but better quality and at home. I understand very much what Benjamin said, what is going to happen to the library. We all know that research, and especially research on manuscript, is a social activity. We have seen it many, many times, and contact between scholars is extremely important. And we all know that the best discoveries are made not only looking at the manuscripts, but being in the places where the manuscripts are kept and talking to each other. And I agree with Benjamin that there is a danger. But still, I would be very happy to have this challenge, to face this challenge of the danger of disappearing of conversations, and do have the available books, manuscripts at home. I think that the project, if we consider the new project, this enormous digitalized library of all Hebrew manuscripts, I would like, as a paleographer, to say something which is extremely important. I think that the Institute for Microfilm Manuscripts has done an amazing job, and we all benefited from it very much. But the quality of images and the colors in the images is something extremely important if we want to preserve the idea of the manuscript as an object. I think that when we look at the microfilms, we are losing some, or black and white photographs, we are losing some of the informations we are essential from the point of view of book production, and also from the point of view of the history of the book, because some of the annotations written in different type of ink and so on and so forth are simply not visible. Obviously, as a paleographer, I will always tell my students, please go and check with the original, but this is always a necessary step, and it has to be done. That's why we should not lose from our side the idea that we are talking about digitalized library, which is a help, but it's not a goal in itself. The goal in itself, and the important element, is still the manuscripts themselves. That's what we need to preserve, okay? And I think that it is how we have to think about it as well. So that's one of the comments I would like to make. Bringing together the images is just one aspect of the coin. The other one is to use this digital library for preserving the existing manuscripts. This is what we really should care about. That's our heritage. And of course, I know it's not all of it is preserved in Israel. It's preserved in many different countries. That's why I think the collaboration is essential, and collaboration between scholars and librarians, because we are actually we are talking about preserving the manuscripts, preserving of this testimony of Jewish and also different nationalities past. So this is the most important. So what I thought when you were talking about the project, you tell me when I have to stop. When you were talking about the project, I thought that it is going to develop naturally from the project of the Institute for Microfilm Manuscripts. Suddenly I realized that we are here, we are facing two different projects. There is one project which is going to remain a scholarly project, which is a project which started in the 50s by this advanced technology, but which slowly improves the quality, because it is what we have heard from Benjamin, that the new images are being attached progressively to this website. So I understand that the old project is not dead, it continues. And the Machon, as it was, and we are very happy about it, continues. So the project that you are proposing, and here I would like to tell Yaacov that from this point of view, it's not really important if you do not want to cover all the manuscripts. That's my personal opinion. Your project, it's an opening of the world of the manuscripts towards larger public. Of course, it's not forbidden to scholars, I understand, to look at the manuscripts, but these are two different projects, and I see them as two different projects. And I think that what Yaacov was saying, it could very easily apply to the project of Machon and its development. So I think that we are dealing here with two different projects. It is how I see it. Now, if I were talking about the project of the Machon, then I would say immediately that what I see here is an amazing scope for international cooperation, because we all know that there are projects of digitalizing manuscripts in Israel, but similar projects are being carried out in many European countries and in the United States of America. These projects are independent. They are usually state-funded if it is France or Germany or one of the of Western European countries especially. And these projects are done maybe not in 5 years, so these projects take a long time depending on the libraries. We saw the collections in Copenhagen as well. I think that Eva has shown it here. So there are different projects going on. And here I think that it's perfectly feasible to work with these projects. There are so many wonderful copies of manuscripts already online. So it's very easy to make a link, to make it available. And also there are projects, and I think that it's being done. So in a way, the project exists already. What you are proposing is something very, very different. And as a scholar in Jewish studies, I don't really know yet. Well, obviously it would be wonderful to have what you call important manuscripts. That means probably you will pick up decorated manuscripts or some of the autographs, or I understand you will have to build up a criteria, but I agree with Yaacov and Benjamin as well that it's very difficult to talk about important manuscripts. But what you consider as important would be important for general public, and that's the difference. And this is a completely different criterion from the criteria that we as scholar users would use. So I don't know whether I could comment on your project, only that I think that it's a very good idea, but it's different, I think, from the big project of the library. Okay. So in the time that remains, I would like to as well to tell you that when you try to make a database of manuscripts, digitalized manuscripts, you have two options. So you have the option of doing it in a very complete way and centralizing all the images and all the ideas and all the things together, physically in a way. Well, the microfilms, that was obvious. You had to bring them here. You had to bring them to Jerusalem to create the Machon and to work on them. Now we are, of course, with completely different conditions with the computers. What we have, it's the computers, so everything's dematerialized. But even so, we could use the model of Friedberg Genizah project, a wonderful model to follow. That's just the example. It's absolutely wonderful. And have all the images taken at the same time with the same parameters, with the same criteria, with the same quality. As I told you, I would like to, the 2 minutes that I still have, I would like to spend them to show you the project that we are doing in many European countries. Some of the scholars, founders of these projects are here. There is Professor Andreas Lennart, Mauro Perani was here, he left before. There is Alina Lisicina from Moscow, there is Daniel Polakovic. I don't know whether I'm forgetting people, but there are several people here. So this is a project which has been developed in 13 different countries. Israel is one of them, and the Jewish National Library, which was still University Library by then, was also a part of this project. So our project is not as ambitious as the Cairo Genizah, well, the Friedberg Genizah project, but it has a similar aim, bringing to the scholarly public, because we cared only about the questions we asked ourselves, were only concerned only the scholarly public, the description of the fragments of Hebrew manuscripts in the bindings. We don't like calling it European Genizah because we all know it's not the Genizah. These are fragments which have been recycled, reused, which were in a way dead and which received a second chance, a second life, being reused for binding of other manuscripts. It's very different as well from Genizah collections, where you go to Cambridge with 150,000 fragments. Here we go from library to library, sometimes to dozens or hundreds of different libraries and collections, looking systematically for fragments that have never been catalogued, and sometimes coming out without any fragment or just one small fragment. And for us, the idea is that all the fragments are important because each one of them has once been a book. So when we place ourselves from the point of view of book production and circulation in Europe, these fragments are extremely important. We call it books within books, not to call it the Genizah. I don't know whether the term is really very successful, but we also deal with notes, with ephemera, if we can talk about ephemera for medieval period, certainly we can, and documents. And we do find quite a lot of documentary material, quite unexpected, in Europe. So just the last minute, I would like just to show you, well, the site is opened, you can see it, but the database is not yet opened. I would like to say immediately that the database is elaborated in a way in several different countries. There are several different projects, lots of people involved in them. Some of the projects started well before Books Within Books as an umbrella project, and these manuscripts are not included in the database, but you will find a link to different projects. So the idea was not, like in Friedberg Genizah project, to bring pictures, to make pictures by ourselves, but simply to make everything available in one place, with different parameters, with different levels, different quality of images. We are dealing here with things that has never been catalogued, so we simply want to keep them. And also, through the project, we really play an important role in conservation of these manuscripts by the libraries. So that was one aim. So very quickly, I'm showing you here an example which was done by Dr. Elodie Attia in Paris. Here you have the place, the archive, the shelf mark, the description. We are all paleographers, so we are very much concerned by the codicological and paleographical description, dating. We also deal with the contents of the manuscripts, its dimension. I'm doing it very, very quickly. Writing materials, everything that the paleographer is happy about. The page layout, the text layout, the script that we define in detail, vocalization if it exists, and then we have a description of the volume, Latin usually or other, where the manuscript was found. Normally our description should be bilingual. They should be in English and in a local language. Local language can be Polish, Czech, Hungarian, German, French, and so on and so forth, or Italian. We have the bibliography, and we have images that you can open. Well, I don't know why it's so, yeah. You can as well, if you wish, if you want to study the script in more detail, you can do it as well. And I would like to say at the end that this project was made possible by the cooperation between different libraries and scholars working always together. There is absolutely no idea that libraries prepare manuscripts for us and we scholars come and study them. It's really a work in collaboration. And this work was made possible by the support by the Rothschild Foundation Europe, that I thank over and over again for their help. Thank you very much.
That's not the real thing, apparently, so please be seated. It's just an exercise. So, can I have Mr. Kiran asking the first question, please?
Hi, my name is Arthur Kiran from the University of Pennsylvania, and I just had actually several remarks, and I'll just try to say very quickly. To Aviad, a couple questions. The first one is, what is a manuscript? And I say that in a very specific sense, not to be boring, but the distinguished Benjamin Richler came to me yesterday with a downloaded record from the database of a letter addressed to Isaac Leeser that's in a private collection in New York. That's from the 19th century. It's not a codex. It's just a handwritten letter. But if importance is the criterion, we have an ongoing project, and he was probably he's been described as the most important Jewish leader in North America in that time period. So the way that, handwritten documents are included in this project, or prioritized or included, I think is interesting. And that doesn't go to the traditional vision, I think, that a Ketav Yad was envisioned by Ben-Gurion, but nonetheless. I also want to ask you, and I have to say, maybe I'm getting old or something, but in my life, I didn't know you could go through a whole session, and maybe I missed it, without saying the name Malachi Beit Aryeh. It's kind of, I don't know what to say, but I count him as one of, not my personal teachers, but one of the great teachers, along with Benjamin Richler, who I've learned from so much. And the question that comes out of that is the Sfardata. If one measure of importance is dated Hebrew manuscripts, then clearly this is the most extensive database of Hebrew manuscripts that's ever been created. He's directly part of the history of the Machon, and I would think that he at least deserves some kind of public acknowledgement here, and I just wanted to mention him. I have to make one last, remark, which is the history of the Friedberg Genizah project. I was surprised to see that it was dated to 2006. When I first encountered the Friedberg Genizah project, the plan was to create a worldwide print catalog of Genizah fragments. And we had to work very hard at the University of Pennsylvania to persuade them that digitization might be a good option. And I want to acknowledge Stefan Reif and my former boss and teacher, Michael Ryan, who actually submitted a grant project in 1998 to the National DNEH to the idea that they could take dispersed medieval fragments and through digital technologies find matches. And that was the prototype of our project that we ultimately wound up doing at Penn with Cambridge and also with the Jewish Theological Seminary. And frankly, it became the basis for my understanding of what the future of librarians should be, namely cooperative, distributed digital technologies with respect to Judaica content all over the world. Thank you.
Great. Would you like to respond?
No, do you want more questions first?
Okay. Who is next?
I have the mic.
Oh, you've got you have power.
I arranged for that in the beginning.
Yes.
No, I actually have two remarks. One for Aviad. I think in favor of Aviad's approach, actually. I think that one aspect that we shouldn't underestimate of putting 100 of the 50,000 most important Hebrew manuscripts. 1,000 of the most important 50,000 manuscripts on the web is that it attracts the attention of everybody. It attracts the attention of the group of users that we don't know. Of course, there's the researchers and they have access. The researchers are in a position to find all the material that they're looking for. But I think it's the larger user group that is actually being catered. He's catering for the project may be catering for the needs of the larger user group that we don't know exactly. We don't know exactly who they are. So that's an important aspect, and it will also help to attract the necessary funding. I agree with Yaacov Choueka that the money is there. But one of the ways to find the money is to show people what we have. And by showing these 1,000 manuscripts, it's easier to find the money. So that's the one remark that I made. The other remark concerns the new, beautiful, promising Talmud project. One suggestion that I would have is that you mentioned the inclusion of first editions. My suggestion would actually be to go for every edition up to the first complete edition. So the first editions of tractates that were published were all single tractates in the incunable period. And my suggestion would actually be to go for everything printed up to the first complete printed Bomberg edition.
Exactly what you are doing.
Yeah,
exactly.
okay, so then
including the first edition of Bomberg.
Exactly, up to that point and
exactly our plan.
My question, just with the treasures idea, is what about things that are manuscripts that are in IMHM with titles like Covets? that they're in IMHM, maybe they're interesting, maybe they're important, we don't know. And I think that would be a really good, maybe another aspect of what's really important to do in terms of research, because it's sort of unknown what that is. So.
Would you like to answer?
No, just the COVIDs is just a, it all, I mean, like I said, the evolution of the catalog in the Machon, they decided that they were limited to at the beginning to describing a manuscript on one catalog card. So if a COVIDs has 10 things on it, so you had 10 cards, and then they decided later on that there would be COVIDs would be like the main entry with all the information about dates and writing and owners, etc. So it's where it says just COVIDs. That's only the entry gate to the description. But sometimes I know it shows up. You look for something and then you see COVIDs, but you have to open it up and then because on the card it will give a short description of everything that is described in greater detail in the next card.
Sharon, please.
Thank you. This was wonderful. There are enormous treasures online, and one of the questions that came to my mind is, first of all, thank you for putting the Genizah Friedberg project together. I am a registered user, and I've enjoyed it from the comfort of my home, preparing lectures at 2 in the morning. It's quite wonderful to be able to pull up images. But one of the things I wanted to ask about was access. You have 400,000 images and 2,000 users. And I understand, and I'm sure that the reason that you needed to register everybody before they could use it was because of other contracts with libraries, et cetera. But now we're in 2012. And really, I mentioned the Genizah Friedberg project at least twice a week to people. Go and check this, go and look at that. And they say, yes, it's difficult, we have to register, and people aren't looking to register. So I had two questions. One question is, are you reaching a stage where you're looking to renegotiate some of those contracts and allow open access to this fantastic, fantastic database? That's one. Along the lines of access, Svardata, which I understand, is the National Library, perhaps someone can answer this, going to make that open access? Is it open access already, or where do we stand with that? It's open to everybody already, because I have a portal which I thought I have access to, but it's not entirely clear that the whole thing is there with all the information. So I'd be curious to know how that stands.
Thank you for your remarks. Indeed, we would be the first one to be very pleased if you can get off the registration process. But many of the libraries who gave us licenses to display their images, they forced us, so to speak, in the contract to ask people to register it. But you are suggesting that we try to renegotiate with 49 libraries, please.
The big ones. Start with Cambridge.
Yeah, right.
You know, if Cambridge agrees, everyone will agree.
Right. So it's a good idea. Excuse me? It's a good idea. We may think about that, and we may address all libraries and ask them if they are willing to let us.
David, I have the first library signed up here that doesn't need permission. Second, do I hear three?
I wanted to add to what Yaacov just said. The truth is that we're negotiating now with FGP as a type of a merge with the National Library, JMPS and the FGP, and we might try to reopen the agreements because we might have to do this in any event once it becomes part of the National Library. So we will definitely consider, this is our policy, to make it as open. Part of accessibility is these barriers. I don't know how many times I've asked for my password again from the FGP, and I'm sure it happened to every, please stand up if it never happened to you.
I have 5 registrations.
This is how that we got to 2000. No, but the truth is, these restrictions, it sounds silly, but I understand, but we all understand now this is 2012, and we will try to make it, but obviously we have to cater for some of the needs of libraries that, for whatever reasons, and many times they have very good reasons to restrict it, And the registration might become more simple. Allow me just to say a few more things, because I was asked.
About the Sfar data.
It's a Judaica curators, but I felt that I was being crucified to some extent. and the truth is, I don't disagree with Yaacov. I think you did put it quite correctly, that we're working in two parallels. We are continuing the work of the Machon. We're not discriminating against certain manuscripts. Some of the people in the room know that Ardon has been all around the world, and we're digitizing and purchasing, acquiring manuscripts without discriminating. I spoke to several of you about continuing this project. So nothing is going to be changing. And in fact, our own project, my own idea of having 1,000, 6,000 more curated list is again something that has been done traditionally. Just like I gave the example of the Worms. This is something that was done by the National. Why did they pick the Worms? I'll tell you why. Because Malachi, who was mentioned, who was one of the people who initiated this conference, and he's in the advisory board, feels that this is the most important manuscript that the library possesses. So obviously it deserves a website. And the idea is, Jordan is moving. No, I mean, there are certain, he thinks it's important for certain things, but this is obvious, the reason that we picked this we dedicated a website. The same goes for the code of the Mishnah of Maimonides, the commentary on the Mishnah. And we're not undermining the work of the Machon, we're continuing, but we are trying to pick the most, to popularize the manuscript in a way. And the same thing was done in the Berginsky collection. What we see on the website is just a portion of what else is there. And we're working now with several libraries about digitizing even material that we already have here, digitizing, because some of the images were done in the 50s and the 60s. They will be here and they might be accessible online, I hope, really depending not on us but rather on our partners. But this is a chance of making this more available. Just last thing about Sfar data. So Binyamin said that is open, but I would like to mention also the Center of Jewish Art and the information that they have about certain manuscripts, the work that they have done about manuscripts, the information that is in Sfar data. We have to think of ways to enrich our own catalog of the Institute using, and again, this is something extremely beneficial if you want to make these manuscripts more, for greater users, more users.
Well, because this is the last session of the Kenes, of the conference, I'd like to express my gratitude and my thanks to the organizer of the conference and to the National Library of Israel for welcoming us, for the warm welcome, and for looking after us for 3 days. It was wonderful and excellent to see so many colleagues from all over the world.
I'm not going to speak about manuscripts now, but the director insisted that since I opened, I have to close. Thank you so much, everyone, for making the effort, coming here to Israel, spending the 3 days. It's been enjoyable and I think very beneficial. A lot of shidduch work. And what I ask, we're also going to do in 5 or 6 months, we're going to, not 5 or 6 years, but 5 or 6 months, we're going to initiate, we're going to write to you and ask you to provide us, tell us if certain things, projects started here. Tell us of cooperations that were initiated here. The more you come up with, the greater chance you'll be invited in 2 years. So think hard. But this is really important because the 3 days, it's very concentrated, it's very good, but if we don't do something, I have a full list of things to do. So again, thank you for being here, and we hope to see you here again very soon.